All right, so I'm trying to get a copy of this transcript here, but that was just uh, crazy. I mean, as Amit Siegel said, if people in Israel actually said that, they would have been censured for uh, being racist or something like that. Um, I mean, that was. Let's see if I can get a transcript here. Um, Everyone's demanding one thing, and that's peace. Well, the truth is that actually doesn't include Hamas because Hamas doesn't care about that. But look, at the end of the day, you have a population and a culture that's been created in Gaza in which it's just hatred. It's just hatred. You look. How do you find Mein Kampf in Gaza? I mean, it's wild. And this is something that has to be dealt with. And look, it's more convenient for people to say, well, if we just change one thing or the other thing, then all of a sudden, it's going to be peaches and cream. But at the end of the day, you have a Palestinian society that's been taught to hate Israel, that's been taught to hate Jews, that is saying that Palestine is all of Israel. There's no room for the Jews. There's no room for Israel. So what do you expect? So how do you reasonably actually come up with an answer that doesn't involve getting rid of Palestinian leadership in Gaza? I mean, just consider it like this, right? You have Palestinian nationalism, which is the elimination of Israel and the need to actually commit terror attacks against Jews. Um, that's the fact, because that's quote unquote armed resistance. So explain how that's supposed to be compatible with living in peace. What's going on? I mean, reasonably, what is supposed to happen? You have an entire people that's basically just been told, okay, you can have armed resistance, and the best way that you can have armed resistance is, this is actually going to lead to you having a state. So now you have murderers that are let out. You have, uh, and then the murderers come back. They're not on the side of society saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe we have to deal with them." This is saying, okay, these people are front and center. These are the best kinds of people, and let's put them on the wall and say uh, these guys are amazing. So that's essentially what's happening in Palestinian society, and we can deny that all you want, but at the end of the day, it's just the facts. So the fact of the matter is, you have people that have been taught to be completely and totally hateful and just not they've not been presented with an alternative. So the only alternative you have is to have the Palestinian Authority, which is actually funding terrorism, be in charge of Gaza. And what are you expecting those people to do? So Trump is just stating things that are openly obvious. Um, and for what he's going to get blasted for it, but a lot of these things are just basically obvious. If you look at Al Jazeera, it says Trump reiterates that Jordan and Egypt must take Palestinians. He repeated his claim that Gaza is a demolition zone, quote unquote, and the Palestinians should be relocated. Quote, I think Jordan and Egypt, they say they're not going to accept, but I say they will. I think other countries will accept also. If you look at Gaza, there's hardly a building standing, and the ones that are standing are going to collapse. You can't live in Gaza right now. You need another location, and I think it should be a location that's going to make people happy. You look over the decades, it's all death in Gaza. This has been happening for years. It's all death. And the fact of the matter is, it's true. And why is it happening? It's happening because you have Palestinian nationalism that is nothing more than a death cult that is looking to kill Israelis and to move Israelis out of the land of Israel. And it's controlled and funded by terrorist organizations and countries that support terrorist organizations. So if it's not Hamas, it's Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And if they're in jail, then it's the Palestinian Authority. So what he's saying is completely reasonable. Um, there is hardly a building standing for what Israel hit. And now it's going to require governments and institutions that are not trusted by any sane person to handle concrete after they just built 350 plus miles of tunnels underground. So there's no chance that Israel would do that, especially when there are hostages still being held in these very tunnels. This is a murderous, evil, disgusting culture, and it needs to be called out for that. And if we can't call it out now, I mean, I'm looking at the Jewish community. The president of the United States has essentially gone on stage and said that the same thing keeps happening in Gaza because there are hateful people in charge there, which we can argue why that's going on. But I think the only room for disagreement is perhaps he'd said, why do people want to go back? And I think that there are some people that would want to go back because they want to wage jihad and they want to become a shaheed and have the opportunity to kill Jews and to destroy Israel. So that's probably the only thing that's working against Trump's argument there. You know, the Biden saying, "Oh, the war is against Hamas; it's um, not against the regular Palestinian people." Even though many of the regular Palestinian people were actually the ones who came in and started looting things from Kibbutz Be'eri and Kfar Aza and Niroz, and came in by the thousands. So if we actually take a look at what he said here, it's none of it is really actually controversial or counter to common sense. It's just that no, for whatever reason, nobody's allowed to say it. He says, let's see. We're dealing with a very complex group of people, situation, and people, but we have the right man in reference to Bibi, which is, again, that's wonderful to see that the president of the United States is actually not antagonizing and attempting to create separation from the sitting president of from the prime minister of Israel. That's amazing. And of course, Bibi says, "I support getting all the hostages out and meeting all of our war goals. That includes destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities and making sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel." Making sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel in a serious way requires the complete elimination of Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and perhaps most importantly, the education system, which is corrupting these kids and teaching them how to be like this from a very young age. So the logical next step is what Trump is proposing. But everyone's scared to do it. They claim that there's geopolitical considerations, et cetera, et cetera. Perhaps there are, perhaps there aren't. It's just unbelievable to see that the sitting president of the United States just said that. And the Jewish people owe a huge debt of gratitude to President Trump for actually speaking the truth on this issue. Because there are so many wishy-washy comments all of the times that we complain about the press coverage from CNN or from other media, and they are not being fair to Israel. And here you have someone actually laying out the facts on the ground about what is going on in the education system, in the culture, in the expectation of how people behave as normal human beings within Gaza. Just yesterday, I had the pleasure of interviewing David Tahar. His son, Adir Tahar, was killed at the Erez crossing on October 7th. Palestinian Islamic Jihad decapitated him, took off his head, took it like a prize to Gaza, tried to sell it on the internet, put it in an ice cream freezer, And only at the end of November, when Israeli special forces were able to locate it and bring it back for proper burial, was there any closure. But the most important thing is nobody on the Palestinian side said, this is not right. Why do you have a human being's head in an ice cream freezer? There's not a single Palestinian leader that stood up and said anything about that. Not one. And it's important that we realize that's what we are dealing with. There's not one Palestinian leader who stood up and said the beheading of Adir Tahar is morally reprehensible and his head needs to be returned immediately. The Palestinian people supported the beheading of Adir Tahar. They supported putting his head in an ice cream freezer. Not one person came forward and said, this is enough, we're done. They actually supported this. That is the culture that's been created within Gaza. So, and people certainly on the left will come back and say, well, there's bad people in Israel too, or whatever. Nobody in the normal, sane, rational, religious world ever condones any behavior like that in Israel. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, you might have some crazy people, and I can't speak to that. But at the end of the day, 99.9% of society doesn't support that. So that's just to counter the argument from some of the crazy people that say that, okay, well, everything's equal and it's, it's done. But no, the Palestinian society has been taught to hate. It's essentially child abuse, and that needs to be stopped. And the other fundamental problem is that when you say you have to get all the hostages out, but you leave a genocidal terrorist organization in charge, it is a little bit mutually exclusive, because unless you remove the incentive and the ability for these people to be in power, they're not going to give back the hostages, because Hamas knows that its safety net and its insurance policy is the fact that it has live hostages and bodies of hostages, and therefore they're not going to give it up voluntarily, and Israel knows this. So Israel is going to have to go back. And the only way to actually go in there and say, we're going to take care of business and this is going to be it, and we're not going to be leaving this problem for the next 20 to 40 years, sounds a lot like what Trump proposed. So that's just some initial reaction to it. And at the end of the day, the Jewish people should be very, very, very thankful to President Trump for speaking truth on this issue. And we'll see how it plays out.